people think, well, there's drug crimes and then there's these other kinds of crimes.
Oh, I'm glad we're talking about this because I was going to ask you, what do you think the percentage of your arrests are associated with drug and alcohol use?
85, 80.
And that's low in my opinion.
80, 85. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be,
You're
I'm giving people some grace.
Yeah.
But
that's still high though. Even
so
giving accommodation to those being arrested, which I would argue that it's probably up in the 90-something%. 85% of people that you as a law enforcement officer, and you don't test, you may ask, but people aren't always honest. Yep. But to even have acknowledgement that it could be 85% of people are under the influence or in a relationship with a chemical that impairs their ability to conduct themselves in the community, that is high.
Yeah, it's really high. And so when people think about, well, if somebody's arrested for a drug crime, we should divert them over here to this drug. Well,
everything's
you're missing. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're missing the point. The person that's arrested for the robbing the convenience store, the person that's arrested for shoplifting, the person that's arrested for that sort of inexplicable assault for no reason.
Even the felony murder.
Yeah.
For Pete's sake.
Exactly.
You know?
Those are drug crimes.
Right.
Those folks are committing those crimes because of drug addiction.
Welcome to another episode of Modern America. We're having a second interview with a guy that I really admire, Eric Barden, the former Deputy Chief of Police for Seattle, who is currently retired. Thank you so much. You don't have to introduce yourself, but I'm just grateful that you're back.
Glad to be back. It'll be fun to talk about things without it being beholden to any employers or political perspectives, and just be able to have a conversation with you.
Well, how's retirement treating you so far? What have you been up to?
It just
because I see what you're up to. You got a lot going on. So.
Yeah, it doesn't seem super relaxing. We're staying super busy. Amy's keeping me really busy, and we've been doing some travel. We were in a documentary, Fentanyl Death Incorporated, and they had a New York premiere, so we flew back to that. We've flown around a little bit looking at programs throughout the country that are dealing with addiction and reentry and those kinds of things, because it's what we're interested in. And we're developing our own podcast, Barden Squared, and having wonderful guests on to talk about really tough issues and how we need to kind of change things and reset as society, is what our expectations are. I mean, everybody feels the right stuff and wants to do the right stuff, but we're not always doing the best for folks that need some help. So that's what I've been focusing on. Just spent a lot of time doing that. And then house projects. Yeah. Getting house projects.
Well, yeah, because you have no excuse at this point.
I know. And stuff has languished for so long that I've been really trying to dig in and get some things done around the house too. So
nice. Well, I love what you guys are doing. One of the things that I really appreciate about my life today is that the growing number of law enforcement friends that I have been developing over the years. And there's an interesting thing that I've recognized is that typically a lot of the folks that I'm really aligned with have been in the industry for 25 or more years, roughly around 30 years, which is about the same time of expertise I have in addiction. Yeah. And we seem to be really aligned on a lot of topics, which I really appreciate. And sometimes these topics are counter to the social narratives that we see going around. So I really appreciate our dialogue prior to us, hitting the action click there before we started. So I'm just wondering, as a retired career-length law enforcement officer that has worked in a number of different areas, and maybe you can just tell the audience, actually, because some people might be seeing you for the first time on this specific episode, which I'll let them know. You can go back and look. We interviewed Eric last year. in his Seattle Police Department uniform. But why don't you tell folks, what the lineage of your history is, your career history,
Yeah.
and then let's talk about like what's your perspective on where we're at today.
Yeah. 38 years in Seattle Police Department. I spent about 15 years in undercover narcotics enforcement and narcotics work. But I think sometimes folks think of like street level stuff, and that's really not where we were focusing. We were focusing more on mid-level folks and upper-level folks who are bringing in significant quantities of dope that then gets distributed out and sold on the street. So we did some street stuff, but a lot of it was mid and upper-level stuff. So I did a lot of work with that. And then I had a 10-year stint where I did intel work, which is like public corruption, murder for hire, threats to public officials.
Is there a lot of that goes on in Seattle?
More than you think, actually. But it was, then we created the Real-Time Crime Center, the Cyber Crimes Investigation Squad, a technical and electronics support unit. These are programs that we created in the police department when I was the commander of intel. And what that really was is trying to utilize technology to improve the efficiency of law enforcement. And also, we really had no way to effectively investigate like threats to schools and that sort of thing, where schools are always getting shut down because a kid doesn't want to take a test. And so they call it a bomb threat or do something on social media. And then we had the ability to follow IP addresses and investigate those kinds of things. So I worked sort of in the white collar crime area for a good portion of the time. And then like I said, I had a pretty extensive career in undercover narcotics enforcement. I had, time in the community police team. I rode mountain bikes downtown. I was a patrol officer. I was part of the first mountain bike police squad in the country. And then the last 5 years or so, I was in management and
how was that for you?
Really different. I always, I really enjoyed the police work part, and I didn't really enjoy the meetings and the budget. And
that's what I'm like, it's kind of hard to go from an action-oriented position and be successful.
Yeah, I didn't
going to office work.
It was an adjustment period. It was a little bit like being retired. There's an adjustment period to it. It's not just like easy peasy or seamless. But I used to do my management thing as the commander of the narcotics section, and I would come out of my office from doing administrative things, and then we'd go out and follow bad guys around and do dope deals and whatnot. So I always had that field stuff. And then when you get into management, it's just meetings and council chambers and stuff. It's not as much fun, but it was a lot of fun to take my experience from doing the operational things into that role and try to help folks that are doing really good work and trying to change the world from their spot in law enforcement. So I felt good about the opportunity to support people when they were trying to do good stuff, but it's not the same as being part of the team that's out in the field working together. But so that 38 years in law enforcement, and it was all in all a overall great experience. Loved it, but it had some rough spots too.
Yeah. Over your career, especially when you were in active engagement periods, how much did you have to acclimate to the folks that you were aiming to arrest? I mean, how parallel did your thought processes have to be? Because I really believe that we have to think alike in order to catch each other and run from each other.
I remember the process. I remember sort of like what is happening? Like, I can't believe I came from just a very sheltered, upbringing. I very few bad things happened when I was a kid amongst the people that I knew and hung out with and went to school with. there was the eggings and shoplifting and breaking, window here or there. But there was just no extreme cases of crime that I can remember being done by my friends and that sort of thing. So when I became a police officer, and I basically came from the suburbs, in Happyville,
Yeah.
and my first assignment with Seattle PD was working 8 at night to 4 in the morning in the Pike Pine corridor downtown
Oh,
Seattle.
good times.
Back when many of the buildings were boarded up and spray painted and they had fencing around them. I mean, downtown was abandoned in many ways. And so, when the sun went down, the only people that were on the street were, thugs and drug users and drug dealers and gangsters. I mean, it was back in the crack war days of the late 80s.
Yeah.
So it was we had shootings and stabbings nearly every night. It was a brutal time. And so I was faced with, like, I didn't know this was happening. Like, I didn't know this was happening miles, 15 miles away from where I grew up. I just had no idea. So there was an adjustment part to it. And going back to kind of how you set this thing up, this question up, I find now, and I've been, obviously in the subject matters that I'm talking about and the stuff that I'm interested in, I'm talking to a lot of folks that are formerly incarcerated or former
People
addicts.
that you could have potentially incarcerated, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I find there's an authenticity to that shared experience, or an authenticity that is derived from that sort of shared experience where I don't think the average person knows what humans are capable of, and particularly when they're at their worst moment.
Yeah.
And so within sharing that knowledge, regardless of which side of that equation you were on, I think, like, we know what goes on out there, and a lot of folks don't. And so I think there's a connection there. And I find this when I'm talking to former addicts, and I'm talking to formerly incarcerated folks all the time. We really have a lot more in common than we don't.
Right. Oh, 100%. I've recognized that as well.
Yeah.
I feel like it was back in the mid 90s, and I was like, oh, I have to know how they think, and they have to know how I think. We're kind of one and the same. We function on the same hours. We have to be aware of the same kind of thing so that we can either catch or avoid each other.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an
It's
alignment.
a game for sure. There's definitely a game, and everybody's trying to win.
And I really appreciate that you're talking about that a lot of people don't know. Well, first, before I go into that, I just want to say, no, I've gotten the opportunity to interview a number of law enforcement over the last couple of years, especially doing the show. And it's not just the past alignment, but it's also our alignment on what we think needs to happen in order to create the change that we are seeking, the outcomes that we are seeking, right? And there's a lot of alignment there, which is, I think it's pretty fantastic, because we're talking about law enforcement who has been heavily scrutinized over the last 5 years. And we're talking about criminals or former criminals and former drug addicts who, those are the antithesis of each other, or so you would think. But when we're all saying, and this is where I think people really need to listen up, when we're all saying, no, this needs to happen, and then we can elevate change, I think people need to listen to that.
I could not agree more. I think that many of the programs that exist to try to help people were created with good intentions, with love in their hearts.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful, but it lacks the knowledge of how it works for folks that have been in that place, and you've been in that place, and so that's why you have just profound credibility on these topics. And I was in that place from the law enforcement role and got to see people. And I was on a first name basis with half of the people that were walking around First and Second, Pike and Pine. That was my district. And you just I cannot accurately articulate to you or to anybody that's watching how brutal of an environment that was.
Oh, yeah.
It
I know.
was shootings almost every night, stabbings on the nights that we didn't have shootings.
I'm
Sometimes
from the Hilltop in Tacoma, so that's
Okay,
where I
all
was
right.
during that time.
So
I
you
know.
know. Yeah, you know.
know.
And it was like just fights all the time,
Yeah.
robberies all the time. Just it was really a rough environment. So initially when I first got there as a 22-year-old kid who lived a relatively sheltered life and exposed to this, like I had no idea. Like at first I was like, you know, where did these aliens come from? I have no idea because I just had never seen it. And then once you're there, then you go, okay, I got to figure this out. To your point, like what is happening? What is motivating people? And that's always been my lifelong interest is why do people do what they do? And that's why I always talk when I'm talking to folks that are outside of the system or the network or don't have experience. I always try to let people know that whatever you think addiction is, it's worse than what you think it is.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, I would talk to people on the street and it was, you know, it's really funny when I think about the way I was back then. Like I really was friendly with a lot of the gangsters, like a lot of the kids, you know, the kids that were, you know, 14 to 20 years old. I was only 22.
Yeah.
And they were down being gangsters and I was, like you said, it was like a game. They were trying to get away with what they were trying to get away with. I was trying to catch them. We all knew it. But when we weren't actively doing that, I was friendly with them and I would talk with them. And you know, it was funny. They called me Braden. Apparently they couldn't read Barden. And once one of them called me Braden, and I was always Braden. I was always Braden. And so I got to learn a little bit about them. And they were just, you know, they weren't thinking, they were very shallow in their thought processes they were just thinking extremely short term about like, you know, what do they need to do right now to get a little bit more money or get girls or get whatever. And so, you know, and then, you know, and then I'd arrest them and they go, oh, you got me. Oh, you got me, you know, all right. And they, of course they knew even in the 80s, you know, most of this stuff, they were going to get out relatively soon. And and I'd see him again and and they'd say, Braden, you know, the next night they'd see me and I'd be like, okay. But over the years and particularly with those years in narcotics where I was talking to a lot of addicts in the throes of their addiction, right? And you know, and you arrest somebody for a low level thing. And like I said, we were going after mid-level and upper level drug dealers. We didn't care about, we weren't about arresting addicts, users. Right. That wasn't what we were doing, but we would sometimes utilize folks that were dealing to subsidize their own addiction. We would try to utilize those folks to get into their suppliers and then their suppliers and do that deal. But that's brutal too, because now you know that addict is making decisions because they don't want to go to jail because they can't use in jail. So they've got to do whatever they can, but then they're putting themselves at grave risk with their dealer and their dealer's dealer and those sorts of things. So it's a brutal environment where you know that everybody involved, you know, there's a tenuous nature to everyone's safety and cops included. Obviously, we knew that that's a unpredictable and rough group
Oh yeah.
to deal with. And so I just think there's an authenticity or a realness. People used to say in law enforcement, when you have that life, you have that moment where your life flashes before your eyes. You're like, oh, that. I mean, I've had a number of those, but I remember the first time it happened, where one of the old timers said, "Yeah, life becomes real, doesn't it? You know, when you see, oh, that could have gone." I could have gone another way, and I could have gotten really, really hurt or killed in that situation. And so then I began to think about, well, the addict is having that same conversation with himself or herself, like, it didn't get me this time, but it was really close. And the drug, and so I just think that there's got to be, what we've been doing doesn't work. I can say pretty confidently what we've been doing doesn't work.
I want us to stop there, so right there, because that word, there are a lot of words that have been redefined and distorted over the last number of years, significantly in the last 5 years. And words or phrases like evidence-based, data-driven, works, help, compassion. Those are some, just to name a few. What does that word mean when you say it? Works. It doesn't work.
What I mean is that it doesn't create the life-changing process that needs to happen for folks to stop using drugs or to stop committing crimes to facilitate their using of drugs, or to change behavior that's violent or destructive or hurts other people. It doesn't work in that way. Now that's not also not to say that it never works. I don't want to say that. I mean, it does work, and some folks have within themselves the intestinal fortitude to make changes and just say, I've got to make changes in my life, and I've got to change the way that I'm acting. I've got to change the way that I conduct myself. But the number of those people that are able to work themselves out of the system and to begin to have productive lives that don't bump into law enforcement all the time, then the number of those folks is few and far between compared to what I think we could do. And so what I mean, it doesn't work. It doesn't work nearly as well as it should work. And
or as it could
work, and we know this to be true, and yet we continue to do it.
What's your opinion on why it doesn't?
There's 100 million reasons. One of the reasons is that when we're effectively, it's a public sector effort in many ways. Certainly there's a bunch of nonprofits. Certainly there's a bunch of folks trying to do good work. But when a program is funded, it's funded often publicly. So there's politicians and electeds who are making decisions about what programs to fund, and the programs that get funded all sound really good, and they make people feel good about themselves. Oh, aren't we?
People that are going through the program, or
no? I'm talking about the people that are implementing. That are,
thanks for that specificity.
Yeah, running the programs, selling the programs, funding the programs, marketing the programs. They're all feel good.
Yeah,
things.
They're like, saying all the right stuff.
Oh yeah, and you're so heartfelt.
Did they ever get at those token clients that'll come through and tell them,
yeah, exactly,
say what it is they've practiced?
Yeah, exactly. And
I worked for a large nonprofit here in Seattle, and I used to have to train some of our clients to go stand up in front of city council to say those exact things so that everybody felt really good about giving those millions.
So you're like a good attorney. You ask questions, you already know the answer.
I do. Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I know the answer. Yeah. I know the answer to most of the stuff that I ask. Yeah. But our viewers don't.
Right.
Our viewers don't know the answer. And our viewers listen to those feel-good narratives.
Yep.
And they take it on as truth and as fact. And so when I bring people on this show, I know what you know.
Yeah.
Not because we've talked about it, but there's just no way you couldn't know, right? Or I'll ask the questions in a way that you'll just tell the truth because you're a truthful guy.
Yeah.
And then it reveals that to people that are voting or that are, donating or
100%.
and what have you. And so and I really love that. And so I want to go back to we were talking about something, and you were talking about society being unaware of what happens, and that you first recognized that you were unaware, that you didn't know what was going on. And I think that is a huge thing. And I've recognized this through some social media comments on some of my stuff, where people were so unaware of stuff that was going on and stuff that's been very publicized in media, but apparently not publicized in the media outlets that they pay attention to. And so I just wonder, can you talk a little bit about that? How aware do you think the public is of the amount of crime, what's really going on when it comes to drug use, social services that are being heavily funded, and
How much time do we have?
yeah, I mean, as long as you want to talk, but
Yeah.
can you talk about that lack of awareness? Does it still exist? Do you think this is a problem?
I
And
think
what do we do about that?
I think that society in general, like, again, going back to, it comes from a good place. People
100%.
are well intended. They want to help the person that's sleeping in the doorway. They want that person to get help. They don't want that person to sleep in their doorway. And they want them to sleep in somebody else's doorway, not their doorway.
Right.
But that's just being facetious, because in reality, I think most people genuinely go, gosh, that's horrible that a person is living like that. And so when somebody comes along and tells them a happy story about how they're going to help that person, people want to support that. And politicians who want to get reelected want to appeal to those things that make their constituency feel like they're doing something good. Where in reality, when you talk to the people who have actually come out the other side, almost to a person, they will tell you that I needed strict accountability. I needed something hanging over my head so that I had to make a change. Now, part of that was and I think in your case, where you decided I need to change my life, and then you went about doing that.
Well, I just want to argue, though, I didn't
Okay.
just go about doing that. I had a little help from probably some of your friends.
Yeah.
So I had an intervention, a law enforcement intervention.
Which is why I say it's not that what we've done never works. What
Right.
I'm saying is that it's a strong person who can utilize the intervention of law enforcement and incarceration to change the way they think about their own accountability. And that's that's what your program is teaching folks in.
That's what I did in my own life, right?
It's what you did, and it's what you're now helping others
and I
do.
teach it to other people. And I argue this, like, incarceration is a tool and should be utilized as a tool. Arrest and charges are incentives
Yep.
to leverage something that is intentional. And that's what I hear you talking
Yep.
about is necessary, right? And we do have really well-meaning folks and well-intentioned programs that are missing the mark because they were never one of us. So they have no idea. If you haven't been to hell, you don't know how to navigate your way out of it. And then there's the dance between the politicians. And I believe they all think they're doing
Yep.
really good work.
I
I believe
think so.
that they do. And they don't often want to hear about voices because at the end of the day, are they concerned with the outcomes that we're seeking? And I love, because you and I talked before, and so I want to not forget to have you communicate some of this stuff, but because you do, and you did communicate it a little bit here, you want to see that consequence is an incentive to change behavior.
100%.
Right? And so you're in this for the right reasons. And I think that most law enforcement is in this for the right reason. That doesn't mean that we don't get lost in the human behavior sauce over time sometimes, but I think predominantly people that are in these serving positions actually do it because they want to see improvement of the individual, right? But We have systems that are really, they miss the mark, and they are falling short, but they're being heavily funded, and this awareness about what that looks like is well, it's not coming out in the open. It's not coming out in the open at all. Anyways, I digress. I'll let you go back to what you were talking about regarding that, because society needs to understand.
Yep.
Right? We need to be more well informed.
Yeah, I think, we need to understand that compassion's a great thing. But accountability is compassionate.
100%.
If you hold someone accountable so that they can make the necessary changes in their lives, that's the best compassion that you could possibly bestow on anyone.
Right.
And so what I'd love to see us do, and when I talk about what works and what doesn't work, and I shouldn't say it that way because that's all inclusive, or nobody, or you should never say never
all
and
or
always.
Nothing. Right.
It's not that. Understand what I'm saying, that we can do so much better. We can impact people and provide opportunities for so many more people to find recovery and to change their way of life, and to quit committing crimes and to become productive members of our community. And so that's the goal for me. The goal for me, because from the law enforcement perspective, again, you see the same folks over and over and over and over again. So the arrest, release, charge them later, have some trial set for a year from now, and then, delays, and then eventually, well, that person's being arrested, 5 times more, every couple of months throughout that whole time, because they're in the cycle of addiction. And they're one of the before I get to sort of my ideas about like how to utilize jail much more effectively, I want people to understand this. People think, well, there's drug crimes and then there's these other kinds of crimes.
Oh, I'm glad we're talking about this, because I was going to ask you, what do you think the percentage of your arrests are associated with drug and alcohol use?
85, 80.
And that's low, in my opinion.
80, 85. Yeah. I'm just trying to be,
you're
I'm giving people some grace.
Yeah.
But
that's still high though. Even giving accommodation to those being arrested, which I would argue that it's probably up in the 90-something%. 85% of people that you as a law enforcement officer, and you don't test, you may ask, but people aren't always honest. Yep. But to even have acknowledgement that it could be 85% of people are under the influence or in a relationship with a chemical that impairs their ability to conduct themselves in the community, that is high.
Yeah, it's really high. And so when people think about, well, if somebody's arrested for a drug crime, we should divert them over here to this drug. Well,
everything's a drug
you're
crime.
missing. Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're missing the point. The person that's arrested for the robbing the convenience store, the person that's arrested for shoplifting, the person that's arrested for that sort of inexplicable assault for no reason.
Even the felony murder.
Yeah.
For Pete's sake.
Exactly. Those are drug crimes.
Right.
Those folks are committing those crimes because of drug addiction.
100%.
Or alcohol addiction.
Right.
Or
whatever dependent relationship.
Right. Whatever dependent relationship they have is feeding that negative behavior. One of the things, just to digress a little bit about the society's inability to understand the impacts. Businesses in Seattle are struggling to survive because they are just overwhelmed with shoplifting and theft. They can't even get insurance. If they claim losses from shoplifting and theft, their insurance companies will drop them. They'll go out of business. They can't run their business if they don't have insurance. Mm-hmm. If they use their insurance, they get dropped. Mm-hmm. If they get, and when they have massive loss, when you talk to like Safeway and Target and all of the stores doing business in Seattle, because our property crime has gotten so horrible.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how much have those specific incidences increased in the last 5 years?
Well, sadly, exponentially. And we've
But we're not reporting on that in the media.
Well, it's I don't think it's that difficult. I don't think it's that nuanced.
Right.
But for some reason, people do. And again, it's this inability for people to understand the reason that those people are shoplifting, chronically shoplifting, is because they have an addiction.
Feeding their addiction.
They're feeding their addiction. They're committing crimes to get drugs. They're committing crimes to feed themselves because they can't stay employed because they're addicts. It's just a vicious cycle that we have got to figure out, that if we are going to continue, this idea of arresting folks and putting them in jail for 24 hours and they get out, and
well, it's a pointless period of time.
It's a pointless. It's wash, rinse, repeat, and it's
not even enough time for a person to get clarity. They're not even in a full withdrawal from opiates in 24 hours.
And that's, to my point, is we are not utilizing that opportunity to when the person is separated from their drug, we're not giving them the opportunity to be healthy, to think healthy, to have the other. I mean, all the folks that are just chasing drug their bodies are a mess, inside and out. We need to treat the sores and treat the wounds and treat the internal problems that are happening. And one of the things that happens is that these folks don't even like themselves. Like,
right.
And so if you don't like
because
yourself,
that addiction to that level, those are acts of self-hatred.
Yeah,
they truly are.
That person, until you can kind of separate that person from that drug and have that some clarity return, and at the same time somebody feels like you're worthy enough to actually treat you from a medical perspective, treat you from a therapeutic perspective. And I know that this is a little bit controversial in the community of folks that are talking about this, but I really think that there's a time and a place for medically assisted treatment for withdrawals. I mean, I understand that there's some value to them going through the withdrawals and experiencing that, because then, you don't want to do that again. And so once I understand all of that, but I also think that there's, again, like I said earlier, different people respond to different things. I think if you're able to provide that opportunity for clarity, and the details of which, how you get there, we can belabor. But if you utilize that carceral setting, when we arrest those folks, and if we were to in jail say, okay, look, here's your deal. You can either get released, in 2 or 3 days, and you're going to get charged, and you're going to have to come back, and we know that you're going to keep doing what you're doing, because we could limit it. We could do it on a trial basis only to chronic offenders. We could just do it to folks that have gotten arrested more than 3 times in the last 12 months, which is a lot of them.
Yeah.
Then we could just say, look, or you go this route, or you go over here, and you can't leave there. You can't leave there either. You got to stay separated from your drug, and we're gonna wrap around services. We're gonna help you with just general medical help. We're gonna treat, whether that be through therapy and discussion groups or whatever, addiction and what that means, and how you can change your life. But we have to convince the person that they're worthy, that they're worth saving. And a lot of folks that are just in that chronic criminal environment where they're just chasing the drug, it's like they don't think they're even worthy of saving. And so we have to, so that's where the love
most
part
of them don't
comes
even
in.
care when they're in that state.
Yeah.
And with Matt, and I'll let you get back to what you're saying, the problem of introducing it when a person is in that critical point of separation is that you've just now reintroduced narcotics back into their system. And so that same separation that they have with themselves, because when you're talking to the drug addict on the street, you're not talking to the person, you're talking to their addiction, and they're in submission to that intimate relationship. They're 100% in submission, which is why you see them over and over and over again, because they are going to do anything, because they have a power inside of them, this little substance that you can't even see once it's in their body, that says, you will do this for me or I will kill you, right? And it's a psychological process that they tend to believe. But when we put them inside of these environments, and this is my challenge, because we are using Matt specifically as a destination. And this is what I want to encourage all of my viewers and anybody that really is a supporter of Suboxone, please go take a strip of Suboxone. Seriously, utilize an 8 milligram strip, put it in your mouth, take it, have an experience, and then tell me, once you come down off of that, what was your experience like in trying to navigate your daily comings and goings? Because you've talked to a heroin addict that's strung out that seems to be functioning normally, right? But would you ever put him to work in your house?
No.
Would you ever hand him a power tool?
No.
Well, it's the same thing with Matt. It's legit the same thing. Just because they seem to be functioning, they're still under the influence of that. And then what happens is, I mean, in a short-term kick sense, 100%, I'm not a zero tolerance, right? I'm not a zero tolerance. Do I think everybody? No. And we're doing that. We're doing that in our prison system right now. We're putting people who have never been on this stuff. We're putting everybody on this stuff, and we're calling that treatment. We're calling that therapy.
Well, it makes us feel good about ourselves.
Well, it does
right?
make us
I mean,
feel-
I'm arguing against myself right
but
now.
it's true. It
but
does.
I think that's why.
It
right?
makes us feel like we're doing something,
Right.
and because the medical industry says it's the right thing to do, well, they obviously know.
Right.
Because they're
They're
suburbanites whose parents got them into medical school who've
Right.
never experienced drug addiction in their life. But I agree with you. In our environments, our jails, our institutions all need to, our homeless industrial complex, our social service agencies, our behavioral health centers, our prisons and jails, they all need to be synonymous in the scope of this process, because they're all addressing the same exact thing with the same exact population. And all these places are making a lot of money off of serving these folks. And their livelihood and their funding is 100% centered in this population needing help.
Yep.
So, but anyways, I digress, and I'll let you go back on. And I'm not a zero tolerance with the Matt thing. It's just, we've got to be very careful in how we use it, because otherwise what we're doing is we're setting people up to have now an addictive relationship with a pharmaceutical that has been deemed as appropriate.
Yeah.
And steals their livelihood as
and also sort of the psychological, the solution to my problem with pills is pills.
Another pill.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that does, obviously that doesn't make sense.
And I love that you said that, though. I love that you said that, because you would be amazed at how many people that wouldn't make sense to, where it's like, no, of course you can. This is science. You solve a drug problem with drugs. It's like, keep coming back.
So
anyways.
So, how the application of medically assisted treatment, that's a topic in and of itself. The
100%
the point that I'm making, which doesn't require Matt, Matt could be a consideration.
Yeah, it could be a part of the process if necessary. Right.
Again, it's like we have to have this smorgasbord of tools at our disposal to utilize and customize for the individual. But when you start talking about that, to folks, to electeds, and to folks that really are hoping to do good things for people, that starts to sound ominous and cumbersome and difficult.
Like a lot of work.
A lot of work.
A lot of stuff they don't have experience
Sounds a lot of work.
with.
I really like this program over here that sounds very sweet, and I
Easy
feel really good.
transition, no extra paperwork.
Yeah.
I like that you're saying that.
Yeah.
I do.
Well-
Can we just sort of go on a different tangent just for a second? And so let's just do this hypothetical environment, because you and I are very aligned when it comes to what we think is necessary and how we utilize these tools in order to dole out the process that helps us deliver good neighbors on the back end, right?
Yep.
Because that's what we want.
Yep.
We want to see people get their life together. We want to see people utilize the consequences to elevate themselves, to reunify them with their families, to become a contributing member of our communities so that they're not out there victimizing anybody, right? And that's my focus. And I think it's also yours, being a law enforcement officer for a number of years. What I just want Tess to hone in on this before I forget. If you were to put programs inside of an institution like a jail and be able to hold people long enough to go through these programs, what kind of components or outcomes would you hope that this specific program delivers? And are you aware, and you don't have to name any, but do you know any that actually exist currently in the Seattle city limits?
The programs that exist in Seattle are well-intentioned, well-meaning programs, but even those programs, when you look for outcomes, you said that word because
those are the things that are important to me.
That means something. Outcomes means something, and we don't show outcomes. And it's interesting. You would think if these programs were effective, you'd want to show outcomes because you would want to celebrate your success and thereby get more funding because it's working. And yet we don't show that. We show instances of contact. We talked to this many people. We referred this many people to something. We hooked this number of people up with this opportunity to get identification figured out.
So we're looking at inputs.
We're looking at inputs. We talk a lot about inputs, but we don't talk about outputs because if you're trying to, once you have a program funded, you need to keep your program funded. And so you're going to illustrate for those that are watching and paying attention, and for the electeds, you're going to try to demonstrate that you're an effective program. And so you talk about all those things that are happy and that are good. Programs don't say, gosh, we are failing horribly here. None of our people are getting off of drugs.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I apologize when I say never or always. I'm being dramatic, but very, very few of us. We don't have the kind of outcomes, if we track that statistically, that would generate additional support and additional funding. So until we have programs that are showing outcomes, positive outcomes, we're just in a cycle of silliness. It's a cycle of ridiculousness where we're making ourselves feel good because we think we're doing something for somebody, but until we're getting actual outcomes where folks have changed their lives and they're not actively addicted and they're making substantive changes in their lives. We talk about housing first. We can talk about harm reduction. We can talk about treatment on demand. We can talk about MAT. We can talk about all of those things. But until we can actually implement a program and show outcomes, it's all happy talk. And that's, we are in a recycling happy talk for programs and not really showing out. Now, that's not to say that there aren't programs that are having success, and the programs that are having success, we ought to go all in. We ought to support 100%, but we need to quit being fooled by inputs, and start demanding output and outcomes for these programs to retain the funding that we're providing public money to.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like a lot of the programs that are doing the good work, that are helping folks to have positive outcomes where they're able to flourish post-release or post-graduation from these programs, they're definitely not government funded in most circumstances, and they are not elevated to the public eye. And I do find that kind of curious. While you were talking, it made me think about, and it would of course be speculation, I suppose, but you know, where are our lawmakers coming from when it comes to continuing to support this lack of outcomes, right? Like, what is the rationale around all of that, do you think?
I think that again, I grew up in a political family. My dad was in politics. His friends were in politics. We had a lot of politician friends. So, and good people trying to do good things. I don't have the cynicism that people have. Oh, they're all corrupt. They're all this and that. Some folks are really actually trying to do the right thing, and that's again that it comes from a good place. The programs that are funded and publicly funded are people are doing it because they think they're doing a good thing.
I believe they wholeheartedly
Yeah,
believe they're
but
doing what's
but
necessary.
what they're not in programs like yours can help to get the word out that we need a higher level of scrutiny to know what is worthy of public funds and what isn't.
Yeah.
And I mean, businesses in Seattle, law enforcement in Seattle would tell you that we are in a tough spot if we don't change the way that we're doing things. And
What do you think is going to be the result if things continue to go in the direction that they're going?
I think we'll continue to see businesses leave. We've had a lot of businesses leave Seattle, and I've being in police management, have been in meetings with major corporations that have significant footprints in Seattle. Some grocery store chains have said if it wouldn't create a food desert, we'd leave Seattle.
Yeah.
Because it's not worth it to them, the amount of loss in theft, in property damage, in security costs, in broken windows. It's not worth it to them when they can go somewhere else and make a profit with much less hassle. And so we have to, particularly in Seattle, but I think as a country, and what I've learned since leaving Seattle, and being a Seattle kid born and raised or down south by the airport by SeaTac, Seattle's my hometown, and so this is where I grew up, and this is where I formulated my outlooks and my perspectives. I didn't realize there was a whole rest of the country that had different ideas, and a little more centrist ideas than we have in Seattle. And I just think I think the most important thing for people to understand is that accountability is compassionate. And I've said that before, but I say it as many times as I can, because it is simply not compassionate to leave people to sleep in their own feces. That's not compassionate. It is not, likewise, it's not compassionate to tell businesses, well, hey, we wrote the guy a ticket. And
do you feel like, and I was going to ask you that when you're talking with the big corporations, do they feel supported by the police department?
They recognize, in many cases, that the police are doing the best that the police can do given the circumstances. But, we have done nearly every change that's happened to law enforcement over my 38-year career, other than some improvements in technology and tactics, tools, tactics, and training have gotten better over my 38 years. But policies and programs and support for law enforcement has moved only in one direction for 38 years,
Spiraling
and
downward.
it's down, and
Yeah.
it's been down, and it excelled exponentially in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have experienced. So experienced some really negative stuff. For anybody that made it through the last 5 years and has stuck around, specifically those 3 years, 20 to 2022, my hats are off to all of you, because that would have been a prime opportunity for anybody to say, screw it, I'm out of here.
And a lot did.
I know.
And a lot did. And we'll be recovering from that for years and years to come.
Right. Well, and especially the community of Seattle as a whole, right? So when I was working downtown, my office was on 2nd and Yesler, right there by the fountain. I worked for CCS. I was at the Lazarus Day Center. Since you were a bike cop down here, I know you know exactly where that's at. There were some cops that I call them beat cops, though they weren't walking around, but they were always the same guys that were downtown.
That was their area.
And I was asking them, because they would come and engage, and I would ask them, why are you not arresting my clients? Because some of them, this would, they don't want to be doing what they're doing, but they can't control themselves. And this would give them an opportunity. And their hands were tied because of prosecution. And so, I mean, things were kind of going a little bit crazy back then. And so, you know, I was able to sympathize quite significantly with law enforcement at that point, because, you know, and a lot of law enforcement were a little frustrated because they couldn't actually help, because that is a form of help. That is a form of help. Law enforcement intervention saved my life more than once, removed me from paths where I could have ended up dead, but it gave me a place to rest, because I'm going to tell you, I stayed awake as much as I could because of sexual assaults and things like that. And when I would get arrested and end up in the back of a cop car, I would fall asleep. And sometimes I didn't wake up for quite some time, just enough to move into booking and out where I could actually not be perpetrated against by other people. And so, you know, and it's gotten worse since I was working down there. And it's, you know, as a law enforcement officer, and I know I interrupted you, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm going to forget if I don't say something. But, you know, as a law enforcement officer, like, how did you feel watching the progression of problematic policy come down? Because that's problematic policy.
It is. You know, we went 1.5 years without drug possession being any crime at all.
Right.
The Blake decision that basically invalidated the state law that everybody utilized, the RCW, making possession of you know, user quantities of drugs illegal. That law was eliminated in Seattle, and the state didn't fix it for almost 2 years.
Do you feel like it's fixed now?
Oh, I don't think it's fixed at all.
Yeah,
I don't think it's fixed at all. I think we have an open.
Nobody cares about a gross misdemeanor.
Yeah, we have an open use. Well, and our open use law, again, you know, it's electeds realizing that there was a need to have possession of narcotics to be illegal, but then wanting it to feel compassionate to the drug user. And so we watered it down to such a degree that it's not very helpful. It's really not very helpful. Currently, the way that the law
has no way to incentivize change.
No, exactly. And that's the accountability, being compassionate, that I'm talking about. This lacks the accountability to make it compassionate.
You can't even require somebody to engage with drug court. And the drug court program here in King County, I went through it years ago, Judge Canova. And I'm going to tell you, though they were sure that I would fail, which I was like, yeah, watch this. But that was a very compassionate program that had a huge accountability piece to it. And because what charges are going into a drug court now? They have to be felony charges. And if we can't, you know, so it's just kind of asinine to me.
I love that you mentioned drug court, because I'm a huge fan of drug court, because it balances both of those things. It helps folks get driver's license or get ID cards, find housing, learn a trade,
navigate resources, do all of those
and
to become
things.
Independent. And to learn simultaneously with guardrails how to be clean in the community successfully.
Because if you don't,
you're on your way.
You're on your way.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty. So
and at the end of it, when you succeed, which is a high percentage of the people that engage, the charges go away.
Yep.
And that is how we need to utilize the system.
100%. So what I'm talking about is and drug court's fantastic but that addresses the person that's got a felony level crime who, gets routed into the drug court system, which is a very, very low percentage of people of the overall number of people that are booked into jail. So what I'm proposing is that we take the components and the tenets and the philosophies of the drug court and move that. I mean, we've got this really successful program, wildly successful program. Recidivism, very, very low for successful graduates of drug court. Actual outcomes, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about outcomes.
Right.
Actual
And
outcomes.
you can track the recidivism outcome with the jail statistics in real time.
So why don't we expand that?
Right.
That's what we got to do, and move the principles and philosophies of the drug court into the very first stages of law enforcement interaction with folks, and get people help at the front end, instead of waiting until they've committed 48.
And now they no longer a bunch of felonies, and they no longer qualify because they don't fit under the parameters. Right.
So we have done some stuff. I mean, drug court, King County Drug Court is a wonderful, wonderful program. What's nice for officers is, speaking to what you're talking about intervention saving lives, officers that made the arrest of folks that are graduating from drug court, they're invited to come.
Oh, nice.
And the officers come and they see that person who probably looks different.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a bit different than they did when they got arrested. They see that what they did helped change that person's life. And that person has an opportunity to be a contributing member of society. Whereas if you'd ask that cop, you think so-and-so is ever going to amount to anything? No.
Right.
Because you get so used to seeing people churn through the system, in a never-ending cycle of descending cycle. And so it's also good for the cops, because it's like, oh, wow, if we do this right, we can actually help people. We can actually help people get out of this cycle. And so I think we need to step back as a community, as a society, as a nation, really.
Yeah.
Look at what is working, and all of the happy story time programs need to. If you can't show that you have outcomes, then thank you.
We want to see people clean. We want to see people housed. We want to see people working living wage employment. We want to see them reunified with their kids. We want to see that programs are actually helping people to get to those places.
Right.
So because at the end of the day, I mean, we're changing all the housing laws all over Washington, not just Seattle. So you don't know who's going to end up next to you.
Yep.
Like, you don't.
Yep.
And
I
want to know that Joe, that just got released from Qualam Bay, isn't going to rape and murder my kids.
90% of the people that are incarcerated
are going to come. They're coming out.
You're coming out.
They're coming out.
They're living somewhere near you.
Yeah.
And
you have no say so where that is.
And currently, again, we're churning out people that with a recidivism rate that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So you're churning out people that are, so you've been relieved of their crime committing behavior while they've been in jail. But we say we can't arrest ourselves out of this deal. Well, what we really can't do is we can't incarcerate ourselves out of this problem either. We just don't simply.
Well, because people aren't, they're not staying there.
They're not staying there, and we know
and
that.
Financially, the numbers just don't jive.
Well, no. Would
It
you rather
costs...
create a contributing member of the community, or would you rather keep them housed indefinitely, which you can't do anyway? I mean, it's just simple.
I got a full ride scholarship to the University of Washington to finish my degree. It was significantly less, and I promise you, I was living here in Seattle. I was raising my kid. I did not live in public housing, and I think that my allotment was like $38,000 for a year. I don't even know if it was that much. It was less than what it cost to incarcerate somebody.
Mhm.
Yet the value in what I accomplished was more. So if we're not turning these institutional environments into a setting for education, educating people to equip them with the necessary tools they need to learn how to fish, because we're handing out a lot of rotten fish.
Mhm.
When we could actually take a fraction of the money that it costs to incarcerate an individual and put them through a process and a program for a shorter period of time than a long sentence, and have it be a merit-based system where they earn their way into transitioning back into the community to be your neighbor and have mentorship and all of those other things, like what we do with my
For
program,
less money.
for way less money,
Yep.
with a higher success rate.
Right.
We'll never have 100% efficacy. There's
No.
always going to be the person that goes back. There's going to be the person that wants to be on mat for the rest of their life. There's going to be the person that is addicted to the lifestyle. But I truly believe that if we have an intentional system that is focused on exactly all of the components that you're talking about, that your intention and why you went into law enforcement in the first place will be realized.
Yeah. Well, there's no question, and that's why I say what you just encapsulated is why I say what we've done isn't working.
Yeah.
It's worked in,
Well, the
you know,
components,
little,
they're-
it's just not working as a
dimensions-
program.
Dimensions of it provide, a piece of what we need to accomplish, right?
Right.
The separation. Okay. I got so sick of myself that while I was in jail, I was able to pull together some things to stabilize me to the next step. And then once I was finally able to go to, and I didn't care whether I went to prison or whether I went to drug court, but I was finally able to go to drug court. And then I piecemealed some other things, right? Because drug court gave me another dimension, but I was able to pull together some other things. We know a lot more now than we did 15 years ago, than we did 30 years ago, than we did 40 years ago. We know a lot more now. And we really, honestly, how ineffective we are as a society is inexcusable at this point.
It is. And to your point, we know a lot more than we did 15 years ago, and we're not putting it to use.
No, we're not. We're actually pretending that we didn't learn what we learned. We're pretending that the data doesn't exist.
Yeah.
We're pretending that some new discovery has come out and that now we need to do all of these things because we have academia and services with that, what you're talking about, all the fluffy, shiny stuff. All the fluffy, shiny stuff. And they're saying, no, this is evidence-based. This is data-driven. But the data has to be the human lives. It has to be the human lives that are coming out on the other end of that conveyor. And if they're coming out in worse shape, hunched over, teeth rotten, face picked up, abscesses everywhere, I'm sorry, that's not a success.
No.
We cannot count that as a lack of recidivism when, well, no, they're not going to prison anymore. That's because they're stuck in this system.
Yeah.
And it's all really the same cyclical system that is feeding into each other. And it's costing us lots of money, lots and lots of money.
Yeah, and that's my point about business. Is it's not only costing us money from a police and courts and jails and prisons and programs. It's costing us economically. Do you think that the clothing store just eats loss, or do you think that they increase the price of everything else?
That they're so wealthy that it just doesn't even matter.
They just don't care. No. So it's costing all of us. The reason that stuff costs what it costs is because the cost is covering the massive loss. That's why the cost of living in Seattle is so high, is because the businesses have to, because they can't use insurance, because if they use insurance, they lose insurance. If they lose insurance, they go out of business. So they either have to massively increase their security protocols, and you see these stores,
and it's all private security these days.
It's all private security.
I'm sure it costs an arm and a leg.
And so that costs an arm and a leg. So, and they also have to mitigate against the loss of merchandise from theft. And all of that manifests itself in increased prices. So I want people to understand that the vast majority of crimes that are committed have a nexus to drugs and alcohol. Vast majority. It's not just drug crimes. It's almost all crimes. The reason that things cost what they cost is because businesses have to mitigate against the massive loss from theft and property destruction and security efforts and those types of things. So it's no one escapes this. You
Right.
can't say I live in this I live in Windermere.
Doesn't have an impact on me.
doesn't that's downtown, or that's over here, that's over there. No.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
It's in your bottle of
impacting-
water. It's in
Yep.
your clothes
It's
that
in-
you're buying. It's in the
all
gas
of
that
it.
you're buying.
Yeah,
It's in all of it.
So we're all losing. We're collectively losing, and we're leaving people in this deadly cycle. We know that people that are addicted to fentanyl are going to die. They're either going, they're going to have a significant enough intervention and that they are able to stop using fentanyl, or they're going to die.
Yeah.
And if they continue to use fentanyl, they're going to continue to commit massive crime to fund that, because there's no fentanyl addict who's a 9-to-5er and
Right.
getting a paycheck.
Not one.
Not one. There's not one. So they cannot possibly fund their addiction through illegal means. So all of that crime is costing society. It's costing all of the folks that are doing the right thing and going to work and coming home and trying to take care of their family and take care of their kids and make the rent payment or make the mortgage payment. All of the folks that are trying to do all the right things don't realize that everything that they're trying to do costs more, because we are failing to provide the tools, useful tools necessary to get folks out of the addiction cycle. And until we do that, we are going to continue to wash, rinse, repeat over and over and over again. And from a cop's perspective, I mean, eventually, like I said, I had no idea what I was getting into when I got into law enforcement. And then I went through a period of shock and awe where I was like, what in the hell? I have no idea what I'm seeing. And then over the decades, and I'm like thinking, man, and I think I also have I like people, like I genuinely like people. So then you have to ask yourself, if you genuinely like people, and yet these folks, and I've seen folks, I've had people come up to me and say, you arrested me and you saved my life.
Yeah.
And you're like, but it's so rare, because what you remember, you don't remember the people that you arrested that you don't see again.
Right.
What you remember is that I arrested that person 42 times, or, whatever it was, 14 times or whatever. Right. So, from the police, the feedback loop for police is that the same people are committing the crimes over and over, which is true. But that's not to say that there aren't the one-offs here and there. What I think is just critical, and what we've been talking about, is increasing the number of people that we get out of that negative cycle. You're never going to get rid of drugs. You're never going to get rid of crime completely. But we could do things
so we don't
so
have to
much
worry
better.
about job security. People are going to be fine, right? I mean, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So a couple things regarding job security, right? Because we're never going to get rid of everything, right? So people don't have to be afraid
to try something,
right?
Try
to evolve,
something new, yeah.
right? To evolve.
Yep.
And with that being said, like the well-intentioned programs that are already in place, how do we shift them? How do we shift them with a comfort level of evolving? Does that question make sense? Like, how do we help them want to evolve to provide intentional outcomes?
Well, you've got to incent it, right? And to incent it, you have to have accountability, and the only
accountability isn't just for the drug addict.
Exactly.
Oh,
there should be accountability for the programs too, right? If you're a publicly funded program, like as a private citizen, I can give money to whoever I want, and if they want to waste it, and I feel good about wasting it in that way, fantastic. But if you're going to take taxpayer money, and by the way, it's not only the business cost. Think about the amount of money that is spent in Seattle and King County for homelessness, addiction.
Hundreds of millions of dollars a
hundreds
year.
And hundreds and hundreds of
millions
of dollars.
Yes.
When you think about all of the...
With a growing problem.
Yeah.
But they just need more money. And that's why it hasn't gotten solved, right?
Right. But when you're talking about how to fix the programs, I think what you need to do is you need to have accountability for programs, and then you fund the programs that have a positive impact, and you don't fund the ones that don't.
Yeah.
And then that's how. Then you know what? The programs that aren't working, guess what they're going to do?
They're going to get their act
They're
together.
going to get their act together
Yeah,
because they
I mean,
want to stay funded.
Honestly, I think we need to be able to incentivize that, where no, these are the outcomes we seek. And this portion of the population that are being trained by people who have been there are actually accomplishing these things. And that's what I find to be really common, is with a lot of the programs that are doing intentional work are often led by people who have been through it themselves.
And well, I can tell you, as strong of an opinion as I have on these topics, I've not been through it as you know. I don't have that lived experience, and I can tell you, the most compelling people for me are folks that have been through it.
Yeah.
Because you can speak to it, and you were there, and you can say, you know, I can say, get your shit together, and they can say, well, you don't know, you don't know what I've been through.
Dealt with.
You don't know what I've dealt with. Yeah.
Or like, how? Because the ego is always going to come to play when you tell me to get my shit together, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, my fear and insecurity says, I don't know how. And I don't know how to tell you that I don't know how. Right. And can you please help me figure that out?
Right.
And there's a lot of value with the lived experience, because they're going to tell me that.
Right.
You know?
Right. You have the credibility that I don't have.
Yeah.
And so if you tell somebody, look, I hear you, but you gotta change this.
Yeah.
You gotta change that. And I know this because I did it. Yeah. I did it personally. That's a lot more compelling than some guy. Yeah. Who, you know.
Yeah. Who read the book about it or whatever.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
I like to use a Mountain Rainier example for this. It's like, I'm going to go up with the illiterate guy who's never read the book, but been up the mountain 50 times before I'm going to go up with the guy that's read the book and never climbed. Right.
I don't think it's that hard to do. I just think we're not doing it. I think we have taken the easy road, and the easy road has been to keep doing the things that make us feel good about ourselves, like we're making a difference, but we don't really want to ask the hard questions about what is this program producing. And so what I would like us to do is to start becoming radical and radically change the way that we address problems, and the problems being rampant crime and addiction. And so we need to provide services and tools to those folks at the very front end. When you start bumping into problems with law enforcement, you go to jail, boom, immediately you are immersed into a wraparound services and a wraparound program that gives you an opportunity to be successful. It's not going to be 100% successful, but I can promise you that if we started to treat folks with a level of accountability to their actions, we would have a lot more success. And if we did that, we would change lives. And all these folks are getting out. Folks would be getting out and being better neighbors and better community members, and committing a lot less crime. And so that should be all of our goals.
Yeah. I agree. Well, thank you. Yeah. We're very aligned. I'm really grateful that you made time to come today. I want to give a plug before we end. I got the opportunity earlier today to interview a guy who is out here homeless on the streets for quite some time, who's been in and out of addiction and all across the West Coast, and who had been served by a number of agencies out here on the Seattle streets. And then he ran into Wheatheart Seattle. And the process that took more than a month for one of the social service agencies to even engage with him about, Wheatheart Seattle got him into treatment in 45 minutes. He is now, and everybody knows how I feel about Matt. I'm not a zero tolerance person, but it's not my favorite. But he is on a short-term Suboxone program with he's going to be transitioning on to Sublocade, and then getting off that, going to meetings and things like that. And so there are some small programs that are doing really intentional work. And what I hope is that people watch this episode and recognize that transition isn't as hard as it seems, and that I hope that a lot of our policymakers can say, you know what, we do need to be a little more intentional about what we're doing and look at outcomes. That being said, is there anything else that you want to say before we go?
No, I love that story though. I mean, people can change, people do change,
Yes.
but it's not. We just can't wish it so.
Yeah.
We have to be, to your word, intentional and provide folks the tools necessary to change, and we're all better off.
Yeah.
All better off if we get folks to make significant changes in their life when they're on that deadly course with overdose.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.